Hey, what's going on, guys? How y'all doing? I'll be straight up with you guys. For some reason, I'm in a really funky, weird, strange mood. So I haven't edited the video yet. I'm actually recording this after I recorded the whole video, so I know that I was super kind of like weird, loopy, strange. You can kind of see right now. I don't know what this mood is, but anyway, this is a we're going over a team guide for Xiao's freeze team. You guys voted a couple weeks ago. I know that it's been a little while since getting this video out, but because of the new banner schedule, it's kind of changed how I do my character guides, and I haven't really had time to go and do this video, so we're doing it now. Hopefully you guys didn't have to wait too long. Well, it's been a couple weeks, but hopefully you guys are patient. Anyway, we're gonna go over the team guide. Obviously you saw a little bit of a highlight video before. At the end of this video there will be gameplay of the team, so stick around for that, or if you just want to skip to that, there's timestamps all in the description or on the time bar. Skip to whatever you want to see, yeah, let's jump right into it and discuss how we're going to build this freeze team and who we want to prioritize and what we want to prioritize. I'm rambling, let's get into it. So this is the team that you guys wanted to see. It's a Xiao freeze team. So we have Xiao, we have Ganyu, we have Qiqi, and we have Xingqiu. The idea behind this team is pretty similar to when we were building Ganyu as a main DPS. Because she had so many ways to passively increase her crit rate, we could really just focus on big crit damage and just focus on those big hits, and we didn't really have to split hairs and go for both crit rate and crit damage. Xiao is basically the same way. Because Xiao's essential stat is crit rate, we can also give him a crit rate weapon plus the cryo resonance, and if you really wanted to go in, you could go with a blizzard strayer, which is kind of like a dark horse option. You're looking at a Xiao with roughly 60 to 80% crit rate without even looking at his artifacts, so we can really just stack that crit damage and go for some really big hits. And because Xiao is an anemo hero, even though he's not one half of our freeze mechanic, he can actually spread both cryo and hydro to our enemies. I've had many instances where I have like one enemy affected by hydro, one by cryo, and I just dash through them and I end up freezing the second enemy, and then I can dash again and then it will freeze the other enemy. So it's kind of cool how he works like that to help like supplement your other freeze heroes. Now, that all being said, there is a slight downside to this team in that we don't have another anemo hero to work as a battery for Xiao. So you're not actually probably going to end up using his burst as often as you would with a team with maybe a second anemo hero or even a third if you wanted to go that far. If you did want to go that route, you could end up switching out Qiqi for someone like Jean, who would be your healer and a second anemo hero. You do lose the cryo resonance though, so you might need to put a little bit more crit rate into your Xiao, but it is an option if you don't have Qiqi and you do have Jean. Now, even though we aren't using Xiao's burst most of the time, that's the reason why Xingqiu is here, so that when Xiao is auto attacking, we still have a lot of extra damage to help compensate for the fact that we aren't using his burst as often as possible. And then we can still use Xingqiu's burst when we use Xiao's burst. There is a small window that you can actually get a single auto attack in if you're trying to maximize your jumping with Xiao, so you can still use Xingqiu's burst there. But that being said, since we are going to be auto attacking a little bit more with Xiao with this build, it's nice to have that little extra damage coming for Xingqiu. Let's be real, it's a lot of damage coming from Xingqiu, but he can help us there. Plus, he's really good with applying hydro for our freezes. Now, that being said, we could also put Mona in this slot, which is actually one of the alternatives that I listed in the original video that I suggested this team. Mona works because we have the Omen freeze combo here. If you remember from my Ganyu video, basically if you freeze enemies that have Mona's bubble applied, you can actually pop the bubble, which means that that damage increase will be there longer. And since Xiao cannot shatter a frozen enemy, he's going to be dealing a lot of damage to those enemies. So if you didn't want Xingqiu and you did want Mona, you could also do that. Luckily, they're built very similarly, so when we're building Xingqiu, a lot of the same elements are going to apply to Mona as well. But Xingqiu does also provide the extra utility of having kind of shields built into his kit, right? The rain swords prevent a little bit of damage. They also heal you a little bit. So while Xiao is losing health, and if he doesn't have Qiqi's heal on him, then Xingqiu can help a little bit there, help mitigate that health loss or protect Ganyu, since Ganyu is really going to play like a secondary DPS role on this team. Even her support builds are built very similarly to her DPS roles, and because of that, you know, if you don't want to be using Xiao's auto attack when his burst is off cooldown, you can switch over to Ganyu and she can deal a lot of damage herself. So really we have kind of like a dual DPS team here. So this team is a lot less Xiao focused and a little bit more like dual sub DPS. It's kind of an interesting take, depending on how you want to play it. Of course, you could play Ganyu as just a solid support hero, but if you do want to get her in and get those blooms off, you can of course do that as well on this team. And then we have Qiqi, and I'm sure you guys will let the memes fly because I've made it known I'm not the biggest fan of Qiqi. In most cases, it's because her heals are way too absurd for what you need in this game, and because of that and her balancing, she doesn't really have any utility applied to her, right? Like, you have Diona, who is going to add elemental mastery, she's going to add shields for the shield synergy, but her heals aren't as big as Qiqi. You're also locked into that small radius, whereas Qiqi can basically just heal the world. Like, if you play her optimally, your team will just like never die because they're so good. But because of that, she loses some of that added utility that we want out of our healers because they don't really provide the same damage as our DPS or our support units. So that's kind of the downside that I don't like about her. Plus, she doesn't generate energy, which is huge, especially because her burst costs 80 energy. The fact that all the energy she gets is going to be passive from another hero is really big. She's also not helping Xiao in any way get to his burst quicker. Kind of a big downside, but that's kind of the price we pay. And we can't really use Diona because of the way Diona's heal works. If you're plunging with Xiao, you have to be in Diona's radius, like exactly when the internal cooldown goes off. And if you're not, you just miss the heal. So Qiqi, you can actually heal by slapping a talisman on an enemy or just passively recovering while her skill is active. But I think I've talked about Qiqi more than enough, at least for right now. Now, let's get into Xiao and how I would recommend building him for this team. So, looking at Xiao's weapons, the first thing we're going to want to prioritize is a crit rate spear. The most obvious and best of these options is going to be the Primordial Jade Wing Spear. Now, that being said, if you don't have this spear, the next best options are going to be Deathmatch, Royal Spear, and White Tassel. White Tassel actually being a very good option, especially if you don't want to spend any money on this specific build, because we are doing auto attacks more often than his other teams, so we can actually take advantage of that passive. That being said, he actually does have a decent spread when it comes to mid to low tier spending, to whales, all the way down to free to play options. Now, Deathmatch versus Royal Spear, it's kind of an interesting predicament these weapons put us in. The question is, which is better? Now, Royal Spear is really an interesting option because it's really because of the passive. The passive is really tough to evaluate. So let's think about it like this. If we have a crit rate of about 40%, we're using Xiao, getting a bunch of auto attacks in, and we're getting a lot of crits. Well, that's nice. We have a weapon with high basic attack and an attack substat, but we're not really taking advantage of the passive. But at the same time, if we're not getting crits, that means we're building up the passive, but we're also not getting critical hits, so it's technically not really doing anything. So that's why it's a really, really weird weapon to evaluate, especially with something compared to like Deathmatch, where you have a solid crit chance. You also have a solid attack passive, although it's not going to be as high as the Royal Weapons substat. And the base attack is quite a bit lower. So how do we actually compare these two? Well, overall, I think that the Royal Spear is actually a very interesting choice, though in order to compensate a little bit for its slightly inconsistent performance, I would maybe try and go for a few extra crit rate substats if you have the flexibility to do so. Although Deathmatch will perform exquisitely, they're both very good weapons. And all that being said about the Royal Spear, someone actually did go and mathematically figure out what the effective crit rate addition is with Royal Spear. I don't actually know who it was. The spreadsheet was provided to me by a member over on my Discord. Thank you very much. So I will put the link to that spreadsheet down below in the description. So if you do want to check that out for yourself and figure out, how effective it would be given the crit rate you already have without the weapon, I will do that, so go ahead and check that out for yourself. Now, for Xiao's artifacts, we really have two different ways we could go, because his best overall set across all his different teams is a 2-piece Viridescent Veneer set and a 2-piece Gladiator set. This is going to be the most versatile, so if you aren't looking to just main this team, if you're looking for a Xiao that's a bit more balanced and can switch teams more often, this will be the set you want to go with. Now, if you want to get a little bit cheeky, or you just have a set of this lying around because you have a DPS Ganyu, 4-piece Blizzard Strayer is kind of interesting. Now, you're not actually getting any benefit from the 2-piece set, obviously, but you are getting a bunch of extra crit rate from that 4-piece set. Now, this can easily take you to that 100% crit rate mark, and, especially if you don't have a crit rate weapon, it can be kind of nice to have, but are you going to farm specifically for the set just for Xiao? I think not, because if you want to switch Xiao to any other team, it's not going to be effective because you're going to have to farm an entirely new set. But it is kind of an interesting option to take a look at. And when we're looking at Xiao's main stats, we are going to want attack on his timepiece. Now, you could argue that you want energy recharge on this specific team because we don't have another Anemo hero to help him fuel up his burst faster. I could see an argument for that. I like building him just for attack because I'm not really upset if I'm using auto attacks or dashes on him more than his burst. I kind of like that playstyle a little bit more anyway, even though you are taking a DPS loss. But that would be my suggestion, to go with an attack timepiece. But you do you. Figure out which you prefer. First cup, obviously, Anemo bonus damage. That's where he's going to be doing the majority of his damage, even though, like I said, we're not going to be using his burst as much. We still want to make that burst do as much damage as possible. And of course, for the circlet, crit damage. We already have so much passive crit rate in his kit that we don't really need to focus on crit rate. Just get his crits as high as possible because he's going to be doing them so often. We want to make sure that they hit as hard as possible. So crit damage is the way to go. And for his talents, what should we focus on? Should we focus on his basic, his skill, or his burst? Well, of course, we want to get these all up to level 6. That is when, once you go from 6 to 7, that's when you're going to have to start using gold books. So getting those up to level 6 is perfect cost performance benefit. Now, once we go past level 6, what do we want to do? Well, I suggest getting Bane of Evil to level 7 and not really going any further. The reason being is level 7 is when your life drain starts to not go down anymore. That's basically the limit. And in terms of the damage multiplier, you're going to want to get his normal attack up because that is where the base multipliers are starting, and then Bane of all Evil is just adding on top of that. So whether it's an auto attack, whether it's a plunge, it's all going to stem from this basic attack. So for this specific build, this is where we're going to want to focus on, and honestly for his other builds, you're going to want to focus on this as well. And then after that, focusing on your skill. His skill the multiplier gets very high, but overall we're going to be doing much more damage with his basic attack, so that's what I would focus on. Now, let's move on to Ganyu. Now, I did mention for Ganyu that we're going to kind of use her as a sub DPS, so she's going to kind of play support. Sometimes she's going to be our carry, and she's going to be kind of flexible. So in terms of a weapon, we don't want to go with the Amos bow, even though I said sometimes she'll be a carry and Amos bow is her best in slot. Overall, you know, if we're using her as just a support, using her just for skill and burst, our Amos bow is really not going to do anything for us. So if we're looking at a 5-star weapon, Skyward Harp is going to be the go-to. But what if you don't have access to a 5-star weapon, as a lot of people are probably only going to have access to the 4-star weapons? Well, the best options are going to be Stringless, Blackcliff Warbow, or Favonius Warbow. And all three of these kind of do different things. So Stringless is really going to be there if you want to use her as just like a hard support, and then every once in a while use her for a carry, because like you're not going to be really getting any use out of the elemental mastery on this team specifically. It's more just going to increase the damage of her skill and burst. So while she'll be doing damage with her charge attack and bloom, we're not really getting any benefit there, unlike the other bows. So Blackcliff Warbow is there just strictly as a damage weapon. So if you are going to use her more as a carry on this team, then maybe you go with that one, because it is going to increase her critical damage, which will still help her as a support, don't get me wrong. But in terms of, you know, switching her in to be a secondary carry more often, it's going to perform a lot better than Stringless. And lastly, we have Favonius Warbow, which is a little bit more in the middle, because as you're critting, she does have to be on field in order to get this passive off. But because our energy generation is kind of low on this team, Qiqi doesn't generate energy, Xiao is missing an Anemo battery, but we need some more energy. So with Favonius Warbow, we can do that, and she'll also be getting additional energy so she can get her burst up faster. So that would be a third pick. Basically, the main goal here is to keep her playstyle fluid. We don't want to pick something that boxes her in. So like Prototype Crescent is one of her better 4-star weapons as a carry, but you know, because we're not really going to be prioritizing her as a carry, we don't want to box her in like that. But if you're looking for a completely free-to-play option, Sharpshooter's Oath is going to be your best one, since her crit rate is already pretty high. We will get the added crit damage, but you may actually want to build her a little bit more for crit rate. Just keep in mind, because most of her crit rate does depend on her using charge attacks, and since we're not going to be doing that, she won't really be benefiting from that as much. But for a free-to-play option, it's her best in slot. Now, looking forward to her artifact sets, I like to keep my Ganyu pretty general, and that's why you'll see I have 2-piece Blizzard Strayer and 2-piece Gladiator's Finale on her. Blizzard Strayer is pretty much a no-brainer. You're pretty much going to put at least a 2-piece on her all the time since all her damage is cryo. Gladiator's Finale I have on her because it is the most general. We're getting an attack spread across all our damage. It's not really specifying whether she's on field or off. So a set like Noblesse is going to increase her burst damage, but it's not going to increase her charge attack or her skill damage at all. But that is an alternative you could go with. It's a lot easier to farm. And if you are just using her as a support, you will get the boost there. So either one is good, but this is just my preferred artifact set. Now, moving on to the main stats, what do you want? I prefer attack on the timepiece, but you could always go with energy recharge. Though if you're using a bow like the Favonius War Bow, which has energy recharge, I would definitely go attack. She really doesn't need that much energy recharge, so I like going attack just for the extra damage. For her cup, shocker, shocker. Cryo damage. Not really. I mean, that's like a no-brainer, right? She does all cryo damage. And for her circlet, you could actually argue that we actually want crit rate here because she's not getting a lot of those passive boosts either from Blizzard Strayer or from her passives. But I like having crit damage. It's just a little bit more consistent. And if you do switch her over to be your carry at some point, you're really going to want that crit damage because she does start getting that increased crit rate. So I like keeping just one piece that you don't have to switch out all the time. Now, talent priority is kind of tricky, and it is going to depend on how you like to play your Ganyu. If you do like to play her as just strictly support, you don't like her charge shot play at all, her burst is going to be where you want to go. Her burst does the most damage out of this and her skill. It only costs 60 energy and it has a cooldown and duration of 15 seconds. So as long as you can keep, her energy flowing, you're going to be able to keep it up all the time. Now, that being said, her skill does hit really hard. And if you have her C1, you can use 2 in quick succession, and you can actually burst down enemies very, very quickly. So if you like using her skill, level up that one, even though I prefer leveling up her burst. And then if you do like to use her as like a sub DPS or a secondary carry, obviously you're going to want to get her basic attack up because that bloom shot damage is so nice. And next up, because we want to save the best for last, third up is Qiqi. So Qiqi is kind of actually pretty easy to build. When we're taking a look at her weapons, really we just want to focus on utility because as it is, Qiqi's not really a utility character. She basically has heals just through the roof, and we don't really want to spend a lot of our effort increasing those heals because they're already absurd and you do not need more. It's just going to be overkill. So as far as weapons go, really we want to prioritize weapons with energy recharge first, because, she doesn't generate any energy on her own and her burst costs 80, as we already mentioned before. So we're really going to need that energy recharge up so that way our other heroes can generate energy for her. So that way we can get her burst up as fast as possible. So weapons that are really good here, we have a Skyward Blade, we have Favonius Sword, we have Sacrificial Sword, but Sacrificial Sword is a little weird because she can't actually proc it while she's off the battlefield, so you do have to kind of leave her on the battlefield for a little bit to have it proc. So it's a little bit of an odd choice, but it still works really well, especially if you want to have that skill up multiple times. Festering Desire is another option I would really consider, especially for free to play if you were playing during the event. Now, the passive, it's not great, but it has a little bit more attack value than the Sacrificial Sword, but it does just have the energy recharge, which we really want. If you do want a little bit of extra heals or you don't have any of the previous weapons mentioned, you could go with something with Flute with just an attack substat or like Lion's Roar, but overall, these are overall worse options because like I said, we don't really need more heals, but you can just build it for damage. They're basically the same thing. Because she scales off attack, it doesn't really matter. Her heals, her damage, it's all going to scale off the same place. Which kind of leaves us into her artifacts, and her artifacts are kind of misunderstood a lot of the time. So a lot of times, even myself, when I was first looking at Qiqi months back, I suggested Maiden Beloved on her because she's a healer. But as I've said multiple times, her healers are just so far overkill, you don't have to spend a lot of those resources into increasing her heals. So instead, let's build her out for damage and get a little bit more damage out of her kit, because at the end of the day, that's what matters in this game, is killing enemies. They can't kill you if you've already killed them. So because that's the best way that we can go about increasing her damage is giving her a 2-piece Blizzard Strayer set and 2-piece Noblesse Oblige. And don't worry about that +0 timepiece, that is literally only on there because that's the only piece I had with energy recharge on it. It's not currently leveled, but that's because I don't often play my Qiqi. You guys will know that if you've popped in the stream once in a while. But anyway, you could also go with 2-piece Gladiator over like the 2-piece Noblesse if you wanted to, if you felt so inclined to increase her heals even more, but I've kind of beat that horse to death. It's a lost cause at this point. So we could do that. Now, for her substats, we obviously want energy recharge on her timepiece. This is super important to get her burst up as active as possible. That way we can deal more damage. We can also do more heals, which is very, very nice, especially with Xiao, because the guy just keeps hitting himself. It's like that old, stop hitting yourself, stop hitting yourself. He keeps doing it. We don't know why. He just keeps doing it. So we want to make sure that we can keep him nice and healthy. For her cup is really interesting. Technically, she's going to do physical damage while you have her skill active if you need to heal your whole team. But I think for the most part, I would prefer to have cryo damage, so that way we can get really good damage from her burst. And finally, her circlet. Her circlet is... it's a circlet. A lot of times you're just going to want crit. I mean, technically, you could put healing bonus, but... as I said, you don't need it. You could also just put attack, right? Attack kind of like fills both roles. Like it increases her damage, it also increases her heals, but I would prefer just to have a crit stat on there and kind of use her just as a burst support, just to get a lot of damage off on that burst in an AoE. Now, looking at her talents, what do we want to prioritize? I like prioritizing her burst. One of the main ways you're going to want to use her is because of this talisman, which you can actually apply with her passive, and you can apply it through a basic attack. So once it's actually on there, you're going to get some healing from here. So basically you switch over to your other hero, and when they attack the enemy affected by the talisman, they're going to heal themselves. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the heals from Qiqi, but you get the damage from your main character, as opposed to your skill where you're kind of relying on Qiqi's damage to, attack the enemy while she heals your whole team. The plus side of that is, though, that she's healing your whole team, and she can do it pretty quickly. So between her skill and burst, whichever one you prefer, I would level up. At the end of the day, like, they're both very good. Honestly, you could probably leave her auto attack behind. Like, it's nice to get the extra damage while she's like healing your team with her skill, but overall, she's kind of like, it's fine. But you're going to use her more for skill and burst anyway, so I would just prioritize those. All right, so I finally made it through. I said some good things about Qiqi. We don't need to dwell on it. We're good. Okay, so moving on to Xingqiu, and like I said, we could also put Mona in this slot, and luckily their builds are very similar, except for their weapons, obviously, because they're in different weapon classes. But if you did want to replace Xingqiu with Mona, just keep in mind the things I say here. They're pretty much going to apply universally to both units. So looking at Xingqiu's weapon, his number one, not even close, best weapon is Sacrificial Sword. The reason being is that his skill has a 21-second cooldown, which is a very, 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 very long time. And because he's going to be using this to generate energy for his 80 costing burst, God, we want to make sure that we have as many uses of that as possible. So having Sacrificial Sword with A, energy recharge as a substat, and 2, well, it can double up on your skill, basically. It's very, very good. Now, if you don't have Sacrificial Sword, your options, not so great, but basically you're going to want to go with an energy recharge weapon. We basically want to make sure that his burst is active whenever it's off cooldown, and whatever way you can go about doing that, make sure you do that. So whether that be the Favonius Sword, whether that be Skyward Blade, whether that be Skyrider Sword, whatever it may be, just slap some energy recharge on him. You're going to need it. And that being said, let's jump into his artifacts. Now you may be thinking, ooh, maybe I want to put the Exile or Scholar sets on him since that has some energy recharge. But I say nay, nay. The main reason being that these sets only go up to plus 16 because they are only 4-star artifacts, so we do lose out on a lot of main stats, and Xingqiu is a hero that actually likes all the main stats across his artifacts. A lot of times you can get away by putting these 4-star artifacts on like a flower because you don't really need HP. Xingqiu likes HP because his rain swords, they increase your health based on his max HP, so we like that. We like attack because that increases his damage. We like his timepiece because that has energy recharge on it, and we really like that. We like his cup because we like hydro damage, and then we like a circlet because it has crit rate or crit damage. So we really don't want to lose any stats there. Plus we're losing substats. So overall, not a big fan of those. So what do I prefer? Well, you've been looking at it for a while. It's 4-piece Noblesse Oblige. I always like having a 4-piece Noblesse Oblige user on my team because it's just a universal 20% attack buff for your team. And Xingqiu is a really good user for that because the goal is going to be to use his burst on cooldown. You could, of course, also switch this up to a 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Heart of Depth set. But as I said, I prefer the 4-piece set for the extra burst damage. If you didn't put the 4-piece Noblesse set on Xingqiu, though, I would go ahead and switch that to Qiqi instead. So I did already kind of list off what main stats I like, but for the timepiece, we want energy recharge. Now, if you had some really weird substats where you have like over 200% energy recharge without the main stat being energy recharge here, I would say you could probably put this into attack, but I can't imagine people are actually going to have those substats, so I would put energy recharge here. Cup, obviously, you want hydro damage, and your circlet, depending on what your substats are, you're going to want either crit rate or crit damage. Figure those substats out first, then you can figure out what's going to be most beneficial for Xingqiu. I would try to get at least 40% crit rate and then start focusing on crit damage. And as for his talents, it's not really, don't think too hard about it. Level up his burst. This burst is nuts. It does a ton of damage. It has a long duration, cooldown, which can be reduced with further constellations, and because he's a 4-star, they're fairly easy to get. But this is just like his bread and butter. It's his mashed potatoes. It's his I don't know any other metaphors. But it's real good. I would definitely level this up first. You can, of course, go with his skill too. His skill, as you can see, the multiplier is real big, especially once you get that Constellation 4 and increase the damage by 50% when you have your burst up. It's real nice, but keep in mind that because that cooldown is 21 seconds, you're not going to be using it that often, and it's going to be doing a lot less damage overall than your burst, since this is going to have a duration of 15 seconds. This is a cooldown of 21, so I mean, do the math. As for his normal attack, you're really like never going to use this. You could literally leave this at 0 and I probably wouldn't blame you. Like, mine's at 5, but that's because I was using him in the early to like very early game. I wouldn't even bother. So all that being said, I mean, that's the team guide. That's it. That's the team. Yeah. I'm in a weird mood. But anyway, yeah, so hopefully you guys like the team guide and the whole breakdown of the teams. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section below. But that's pretty much going to do it for me here. You know, as usual, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to let you guys watch some gameplay of the team in action. Hopefully you guys do enjoy. And if you did enjoy and you want to see some more content from me, you can head over to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazze, where of course I stream because it's Twitch, or you can go to my YouTube page, which is right here. You're watching it right now. Click that red subscribe button, like the video if you liked it, and click that notification bell. That way you never miss a video. And if you want to join us over on Discord, link will be down in the description below. I'm getting out of here because I need a nap or something. I don't know. My brain's not working. Enjoy the gameplay. See you all in the next video. Peace.